One other bit of news before we get into the news. I'm doing a live event. We're doing a live event. Greg and I are doing Speaking Moistly Live. And so the title is A Doctor, a Nurse, and a Paramedic Walk into a Bar. It'll be lots of fun. We've got Dr. Patrick Phillips. We've got Sarah C., because I'm going to absolutely not do her last name any kind of justice. And we're in discussion with a couple of different paramedics, and we just haven't firmed it up yet. So we're figuring that out. April 15th, hope you can make it. Link is in the description. It's at CanadaPoly.com as well. You can check out the events tab at the top there, and everything is done on CanadaPoly.com. So you can check it out and sign up and buy your tickets and all of that stuff. Check it out. I hope you can join us. There's going to be live music. Somebody might be playing guitar, like Greg. I'll be bringing my guitar too. It'll be fun. It's supposed to be an uncensored round table, a discussion, tongue in cheek, but also a conversation of importance, because the crazy stuff we've lived through, man, the crazy stuff that's happened. It'll be nice to get together. So I'm hoping to do more of these as well. So if you're interested in that, check it out. If you can't make this one, maybe you can make the next one. Okay, let's get into it, because there's lots to get to. Laura says, here is Mary Ng with her friend Montreal Chi Chi Lee. I think that's how you say that. The alleged station chief at Sino, Quebec. Mary absolutely refused to step down and said so on national television yesterday, even after being caught by Ethics Canada stealing taxpayer dollars. The longer Katie Telford and Justin Trudeau let this fester and doesn't fire Mary, the worse it's going to get. Hold on to your hats. Do you think this might be a problem? I don't know. It's quite interesting. So this is Mary Ng and her friend, right? The station chief. And it seems if this picture took place recently, it seems like showboating a little bit to me. It seems like, look what we can do. If it's an old picture, then the connections are concerning in and of themselves. But if it's a new picture, it seems showboaty. It seems like, look what we're doing. Like when Fonzie jumped the shark. Here's the real Andy Lee. She says, Bob McCain, or Mackin, I think that's Mackin, expands on this. Cash flew from West Coast donors, so people out of province, to Trudeau's Montreal Papineau riding in 2015 and 2016. Many of the donations to Trudeau and other Liberal Party candidates' campaigns came from individuals connected to the Chinese Communist Party. And she's responding to her own tweet that says, I would say a lot of people making near max donations to Justin Trudeau's Papineau riding association from outside of Quebec, and particularly from British Columbia before and during the 2015 election, is not ordinary at all. See a pattern? And Kootenai Bob says, keep in mind that at the time, there was suspected Chinese massive money laundering running through BC casinos and real estate deals. When it comes to Chi Coms, there are no coincidences. And here is, hold on a second. Here's an article from 2022 talking about, from CTV News Vancouver, talking about money laundering. It says, scathing report highlights multiple failings that led to laundering of billions of dollars in BC. And it says in 2014, billions of dollars in cash were laundered through British Columbia casinos, a report commissioned by the provincial government found. The 1,800-page report on laundering between 2008 and 2018 was released Wednesday by former BC Supreme Court Justice Alan Cullen. It's the result of 133 days of hearings where the Commission of Inquiry into Money Laundering in BC heard testimony from 199 witnesses. The inquiry explored the myriad of ways in which the greedy and the devious seek to make the crime-stained money appear legitimate, the report said. Cullen was highly critical of the BC Lottery Corporation and several provincial ministers responsible for gaming for not doing enough to stop the rampant money laundering, which he says was happening in plain sight. In 2014 alone, British Columbia casinos accepted nearly $1.2 billion in cash transactions of $10,000 or more, including 1,881 individual cash buy-ins of $100,000 or more, an average of more than 5 per day. Cullen's report does not estimate exactly how much money was laundered in BC, but said it amounted to billions of each year. Sophisticated professional money launderers operating in British Columbia are laundering staggering amounts of illicit funds, the report said. So it's pretty well bricks of cash. It often consisted predominantly of $20 bills oriented in non-uniform fashion, bundled in bricks of specific values, as opposed to a number of notes, bound with elastic bands and carried in shopping bags, knapsacks, suitcases, gym bags, cardboard boxes, and all manner of other receptacles. The report also said the cash was frequently delivered to casino patrons at or near casinos very late at night or early in the morning by unmarked luxury vehicles. It should have been apparent to anyone with an awareness of the size and character of these transactions that lower mainland casinos were accepting vast quantities of proceeds of crime during this time period, Cullen said. Stood by and let it happen. Cullen wrote that despite repeated warnings from various levels of law enforcement, no meaningful action was taken to address the issues until 2015. BCLC realized these calls for action and continued to allow these transactions almost without exception, the report said. Now, through the years, I've reported on this, and it's pretty wild that oftentimes the illicit funds were through sales of drugs. So they would make drugs in China, sell them in Canada, launder the illicit funds, and sometimes they would be laundering money from China too. There's not to say that they weren't doing that, just saying the Vancouver method included selling drugs, laundering the money through the casino, and then sending it back to China to make more drugs, I guess. Also buying real estate to launder the money was another way that was done. So they would do down payments in cash, hockey bags full of cash, which is wild, right? And that's a lot of money, and that would send off red flags. And the funny thing is, they tried to make the lawyers responsible. They tried to say the lawyers were facilitating this and the real estate agents. But the lawyers and the real estate agents were red flagging these things for people, for CSIS and for RCMP. Nobody did anything. And every single case against this, every case against a money launderer or somebody who's been involved in this whole thing collapsed. So it's pretty wild. It's absolutely incredible. So the influence and the money laundering, and where does that money go? Looks like they invested in Canada, right? So they're just investing in our politics, our political discord. That's one way of looking at it, I suppose. Here is Andy Lee again, and she is posting this 2020 letter to a friend of Justin Trudeau's, and it says, "Dear friend," and it's got Chinese characters at the top, and it's got a prime ministerial seal. November 30th, 2020. "Dear friend, I am pleased to extend my warmest greetings to everyone celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Confederation of Toronto Chinese Canadian Organization, the CTCCO. Since it was founded in 1985, the CTCCO has been committed to serving the Chinese Canadian community, promoting Chinese culture, and supporting exchange and collaboration between Canada and China." And so he's kowtowing? I don't know. Saying how much he really enjoys the fact that these guys have been around since 1985. Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc, has called for an independent investigation into election interference and says the investigation should include Trudeau's riding of Papineau. Justin Trudeau can't just call everyone a racist and must agree to a public and truly independent inquiry. Anybody who's asking for an inquiry is looking for a blue pill fight. They don't want actual accountability or anything like that. They're not looking to hold Justin Trudeau accountable for any of this. They're looking for a way to whitewash this. So that's, if they're fighting hard for an inquiry, if they get an inquiry, they're going to celebrate like they won. And it's kabuki theater. What really should be happening is the government should be falling. The government should not be in charge. The government that was infiltrated by Chinese communists should not be investigating itself. It should be dropped. A new government should be elected, or a caretaker government until we can confirm our elections are secure, should be in place. And then those people should be investigated and charged and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. That's how this should work. Has nothing to do with investigations or anything like that. And not to say that the whiff of allegations like that is one thing, but what we've got is a bit more than a whiff of allegations, I think. I think that we've got something very seriously and very concerning, and MPs in the House should force a confidence vote and drop this government. And they shouldn't be waiting for their leadership to say it's okay. Here's a National Post, and they say Conservatives had sudden, unusual drop in votes in ridings of concern for Chinese interference data. That's from the report. Evidence of China's alleged alleged influence in the 2021 federal election might be found as much in what didn't happen as what did, namely the significant number of previous Conservative voters who did not show up to cast a ballot in ridings in British Columbia and Ontario. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced probes into allegations of foreign interference last week after several media reports suggested Beijing had directed an interference campaign in a few ridings in the Toronto and Vancouver areas. The National Post reviewed voting tallies from ridings identified as areas of concern by various reports and by conservative campaign officials. The ridings are all home to large populations of Chinese Canadians. Across multiple ridings, a similar pattern emerged. Conservative candidates saw significant fewer supporters coming to the polls. However, the Liberals did not see large gains, indicating that large numbers of voters switched allegiances, but that for some reason the large number of voters did not vote at all. And I'm going to scroll down. It says, victorious Liberal MP Paul Chiang put on a strong campaign, garnering 22,000 votes. It was Chiang's first election, and on doorsteps, he emphasized his strong local roots in the riding and his decades of work as a police officer. Trudeau visited the riding several times, but Chiang only received 1,500 more votes than the previous Liberal candidate did. Far more important to the election result was the steep drop in support for Chiang's competitor Soroya, and they go through Soroya's pedigree here. I should have highlighted it. I apologize. In 2015, Soroya received 24,000 votes, 3,000 more than his Liberal challenger, allowing him to take the seat from the Liberals even as the Trudeau government was swept to power. Soroya held the seat in 2019, receiving 26,000 votes, but in 2021 his vote total fell by more than 7,000, and he lost. So the vote totals for conservative candidates were dropping like a stone, and Liberal candidates were garnering a couple more votes, but not many. So it's very interesting how that's playing out. Now, the National Post notes, back to the article, Chiang has shown no evident favoritism for China, and since being elected, voting for a motion condemning the Chinese government for their treatment of the Uyghur genocide just last month. In BC, former Conservative MP Alice Wong won the seat from Richmond Centre in 2015 with more than 17,000 votes, and in 2019 with more than 19,000 votes. But in 2021, her vote count sank by 6,000 votes to 13,440. She lost to a Liberal, despite the Liberal vote increasing only by about 2,000. Several other ridings around Toronto and Vancouver with large Chinese Canadian populations saw declines in Conservative support, without the bulk of that support switching to other parties. Former Conservative MP Kenny Chiu lost his Stevenson-Richmond East riding after 4,400 fewer Conservative supporters voted for him in 2021 than in 2019. He has alleged a misinformation campaign was spread on Chinese social media apps, including WeChat, about his party and his positions, including that the Conservatives were going to ban WeChat. So very interesting stuff. If Chinese are swinging the vote, and the way I think what they're suggesting here is that the conservative Chinese who would normally show up to vote for a conservative in a heavily Chinese populated area just don't go to vote at all. Instead of voting conservative, they were told to vote Liberal or don't vote at all. So they didn't vote at all, right? And I think that that's plausible. I think that maps well. So we'll see, right? And is that interference? Yeah. Yes, it is. Sure it is. Yep, 100%. I think it's interesting aspect of Canada. The people who live here often maintain, ties to their culture and like cultural language. And like WeChat is one example where WeChat is used for everything. Like Elon Musk was saying, everything for China. You pay for things in China with WeChat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems like a threat to Canada to allow that or to turn a blind eye to it. And I'm not saying that keeping your culture alive is a bad thing, and speaking whatever language you spoke or your parents spoke at home is a bad thing. I don't think that that's bad, but I think that it's an interesting technological quirk that Canada is allowing such a strong cultural thing from China to be imported to Canada. I can't say I'm surprised, though. I think the disruption and end of the culture that built this country is the goal, and it's happening in real time. We're watching it. Brian says the Chinese interference scandal is now affecting Quebec provincial and municipal elections, and Marguerite says unbelievable in this Montreal article, and I'll get to the article in a second. The two issues of the Chinese police stations and election interference have come together, with the head of two centers and a Liberal candidate being elected after WeChat messaging. So it's the same allegation, right? So here's the article. Chinese police stations interfered in election campaigns. Body investigated by the RCMP explicitly recommend which municipal officials to vote for. So they got explicit recommendations. The two Quebec establishments suspected The two Quebec establishments, suspected by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police of being Chinese police stations, got involved in politics during the last municipal and provincial elections, our Bureau of Investigations discovered. So they were telling people who to vote for, which, not great. Right? Not great. That's up to you, and it should be up to you. Here's Melanie Joly talking about China and how Canada deals with China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Melanie Joly has been criticized with being completely not qualified to do her job because her job is foreign affairs and she doesn't have any foreign affairs experience. So people have been upset with her since 2021. It's 2023 now. Here's Melanie Joly talking tough, looking directly into people's eyes. I'm sure they're intimidated. Haha.
Well, thank you. Our position on China was clearly highlighted back in November when I released our Indo-Pacific strategy. We said that we believe that China was an increasingly global power that was trying to bend the rules of the international system in its favor. And in that sense, we needed to challenge China when we ought to, and we need to cooperate with China when we must. And so in that sense, we've been very clear that we will challenge China on many issues. We will never tolerate, never accept any form of foreign interference. We will never accept any form of violation of our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And we also will make sure that we will engage with China and have difficult conversation with them. And we're following very closely the fact that President Xi is undergoing his third term, and that is a first in modern Chinese history.
Interesting. I mean, it's a lot of vague kind of statements. We're going to cooperate with China when we must and talk tough when we can and things like that. We will accept zero interference in our elections. But I mean, they have, though. They have, and for multiple elections, not just one or two, multiple. So it's very empty when I hear that. Personally, I don't believe that they're doing what they can. Here's another example of I don't believe that they're doing what they can. Chinese interference, you say? Well, we've got a registry that's going to take months to set up. Here's Blacklock's reporter on Marco Mendocino. It says registry of foreign agents will take months. Marco Mendocino tells reporters, omits mention of registry bill that's languished in the Senate for months. Why don't we do our job? Yeah, well, they don't do their job because they're pushing an ideology and they're putting in place pieces to get that ideology done. And here's a great question. Can't Be Bought says, now that we know that the Chinese Communist Party has interfered in Canadian elections, is it really a stretch to assume that they've also installed people in unelected positions of power in Canada, consider the last 3 years? W8, who she is, and how did she get appointed to this position? Yeah, and the picture is of Dr. Tam. There's questions. I have questions. Here's the CTV News article about the money laundering. And if you look up China in the money laundering article, I thought it's such a strange thing that China wasn't mentioned at all. Money laundering, lots of money laundering. Where's all the money coming from? Crime. But don't mention anything to do with China. No, we'll just skip over that one. All right. Gotcha. Sounds great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com or CanadaPoly2.locals.com for full episodes of Canada Poly Daily, looking at Canadian politics from a Canadian point of view. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful